I'd like to welcome everybody to this special June 21st, 2022 meeting. This is a joint meeting between the Sueur-Henderson School Board and the Sueur City Council. This will be a information type meeting. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we go into the presentation, I thought I'd take this opportunity to introduce ourselves. We're kind of scattered amongst school board members and city council. So at this time, I'll start and we'll work our way to the right. My name is Sean Kirby. I'm the mayor of Sueur. I've been serving as mayor since January of 2001.
I'm a school board member, and I've been on the school board now for almost 4 years. Well, in my 4th year. So, and a local hit. Who do you represent? Henderson. So I'm the, I live in Henderson and I have kids in the district as well.
Scott Schleter, City Council, been on for a little over 2 years.
Jim Wagner, Superintendent for Sueur-Henderson. I've been here 11 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bridget Tuck. I'm the chair of the Sueur-Henderson School Board, and I represent the township. I live out in Tyrone Township.
I'm Pam Williams, a member of the City Council, just appointed recently.
I'm Jenny Burns, school board member. I represent the Sharon Township, and I've been on since May.
Dave Swanberg, City Council, year number 2.
Kelsey Schwartz. I am also in Sharon Township, and this will be my 6th year on the school board.
Marvin Sullivan. I've been on the City Council now for a little over 4 years, I think.
Matt Hathaway, school board member from Henderson Township, and I've been on for 4 years now.
Brian Sorensen, school board member, been on for about 2 years. I live in the city of Henderson.
Joe Roby, city administrator for the city of Sueur.
Thank you, everybody, for the introductions. At this time, I'm going to introduce Superintendent Wagner. We're going to have a little discussion about how the city of Sueur and our school district will move ahead as a community. I'm sure everybody's got a lot of questions and kind of curious about how things are going to proceed from here. So at this time, Mr. Wagner, if you're ready, we'd like to hear from you. Thank you.
All right, is this working? Yep. All right.
Good.
I was supposed to be on this so everybody could hear us. Let's see here. Do I just advance it? There we go. All right, so as everybody knows, the school district is doing a building bond to replace Park Elementary. Early voting starts June 24th. The actual election day is the primary election day on August 9th. The purpose of doing it during that time was to avoid the national election in November, but to also link it to another election, so that way the participation from the public will be more representative of both groups, so that way there's more voting locations for the general public to vote and that type of thing. So as far as the process, so if you're familiar with building bonds with the government, we have to have a review and comment. And so our review and comment took the information from our last bond that we did, or a bond vote that we did back in November, looked at the results, tied into what the public response was, the election results were, and then we went and changed the scope of what we're looking at. From previous vote, we were looking at doing something both in Sueur and Henderson. This time around, we're looking at strictly based on the information of the public meetings and the feedback we got from the voters that we have to bring the costs down and have a cheaper option for the voters to look at. So with that, we sent our review and comment to the state. The state came back with a positive review and comment. The reason that's a big deal for a positive review and comment is if the state were to come back with a negative review and comment, the school district could still move forward with a vote, but then you would have to have a super majority in order for it to pass. You have to have a 60% approval plus 1, With a positive review and comment, you only need a simple majority, which is 50% plus one in order for the bond to pass or to move forward, okay? So this is kind of the layout right now of the building or the location of what we're looking at. We're proposing to move Park Elementary or redo a Park Elementary at the location at the high school, middle school. The purpose of moving it there is to bring things together, to allow us to be more efficient with our staffing, one location. The buildings would not be connected, and I'll get more into that as we get into this presentation. But for this purposes, it kind of gives you the size and the location of everything and what it looks like and the overall scale of how it looks currently right now. If every question were to pass, this is kind of a concept map of what it would look like. And so the elementary building would be located here. This parking lot is designed to mimic the size of what you have for a parking lot in front of the high school. So it kind of gives you an idea of the scale. The purpose of putting it here, we looked at a number of different models based on where's the best location for a building, and the best model has it here, the building here, and the parking lot set up like this so we could create a longer drive-in to get traffic off the street for parents that are picking up or dropping off their students. So the idea was, if you have this long entryway over here, to eliminate the traffic that's on the main street here in front of the high school, middle school, bringing traffic in on Kingsway, and then having a long entryway so then the people would drive in, have a nice loop to drive right on out, to keep it simple, okay? The size and the scope then of what the softball fields would look like, the moving of the tennis courts, and then with the service road coming in here, this would also add additional parking. And then we have two separate play areas, one for grades 1 through 5, and this area would be pre-K through K. Entryways here, here, and here. A common bus drop-off, so kids would be dropped off at the bus location for elementary going this direction, or high school, middle school going that direction. An additional career and tech area for an auto shop area would be here. The skilled trades are part of the question 3 as far as the renovation of that whole area for that, and I'll get more into that in a bit. And then this is kind of the overall layout as of right now. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so question 1, and the purpose of question 1 and why they're worded the way they are is specifically that as a district for bonding, we will not bond more than what the question asks. We could bond up to that amount with the idea that if we can bring the cost down, we only bond what we need for dollars. So we're not going to bond. If we can bring the $39.9 million cost down, we're going to bond for only what we need, not the full amount, okay? And so when we initially designed this with everything going on with the economy, we had to make sure that everything was set so that way it wouldn't come in over budget. So even with what's going on with the economy right now, we are confident that we can stay within this budget and still bring the cost down to try not to bond the full amount, okay? So these are the things that are part of question 1. You can see the list that we have here. Obviously, we're looking at, right now, the state has a requirement of a minimum of 2 cross-court gyms for an elementary. So right now, that's part of question 1. Secured entrance for the elementary, a separate kitchen. Obviously, the building would be air conditioned, and it basically gets us to a level of promoting this type century learning environments, okay? Park has served its purpose, but as of right now, it's not a current century educational model for what we need, okay? We also have the cost to demo park right now. That's on there. The district's looking at a number of different options that if we have a developer or even talks with the city, figure out if there's something we can do. We're open to anything right now. Right now, it's allocated for $500,000 to demo it. That's part of that cost. If we don't have to demo it and somebody wants to take it over, it would save $500,000 off the overall cost then of question 1, okay? So these are some pictures of what a new building would look like. The current model, our architect that's been designing it and looking at it, designed the new elementary in Marshall, Minnesota, and they also have a 2-story building. So the model itself, as far as the box structure of it, is going to be similar, but then if it passes, we would have the input as far as what the inside would look like, the designs and those types of things. So it kind of just gives you a kind of a visual of what some of the things could look like in a new elementary. This would be a new entranceway here. This is what's currently in Marshall. The two-storied media center that you can see, the windows are a big thing now with elementary buildings and just getting natural light in. It's kind of a soothing mechanism for students throughout the course of the day. Kind of more colorful with the pictures and just kind of the furniture, how it's designed. Commons area that they have over there. And then the 2 stories, they color the stairwell now to match more of the elementary colors and that kind of thing. So it kind of brightens the building up. So it's not just your typical brick and mortar color with the color of the brick that are laid there. And some of the ways that we can reduce the project costs. One would be, I talked a little bit about the demolition of the park. If we can find someone that wants to take over that property or take over that building, I'm open, and as a district, we're open to looking at any options so we can reduce that cost. The storm shelter wrestling room. The state passed last year a requirement that you have to have a storm shelter a part of any new buildings for schools. So with that, there's a requirement that you have to have, that their baseline requirement is that you have 45 occupants per classroom. So if you do 45 occupants per classroom, they're stating that we would have had to have had a storm shelter the size of a full-size gymnasium in order to pass code or pass what the requirement is. So if you think about what that looks like or is, a storm shelter has to withstand winds of up to 240 miles an hour. So I call it a bomb shelter, is what it basically ascends to. It has to be an open area. Well, the only open area that big of 8,000 or 8,500 square feet for that kind of a capacity is a gymnasium. So if you think of the height of a gymnasium, the size of it, the roof, all that kind of stuff, the costs are astronomical. It's ridiculous at that level or for that kind of requirement. So once we sent the question out, behind the scenes, I've been working with the architect and our contractor to talk with the state, look at other options. And so we just have to submit to the state that for our practical purposes of what we're going to do, our elementary is not going to have more than 25 bodies per classroom. And so what that does is it drops our storm shelter requirement from 8,500 square feet down to 4,000 square feet. And so that's where the open area of a storm shelter wrestling room comes into play, because now a wrestling room basically is 2 full-size mats laid next to each other, an open area. That's more practical and a lot easier and a lot cheaper, because now you can bring the height of the roof down. It's more going to be located underneath the gymnasium, so then that way it's protected and it meets the requirements that you need for a storm shelter. Dropping the cost down, I'm hoping by at least $1 million, if not more, simply because of not having that height and the amount of a volume of brick and mortar that you have to make something that strong, essentially. Okay. And then the other thing we're looking at is using, because of not having to have the storm shelter in the gymnasium, looking at using custom tension fabric buildings for the gymnasium instead of brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is really expensive. Custom fabric buildings are going to be half to a third of the cost of a gymnasium. Again, looking at bringing the cost down. Our focus based on the public meetings that we had is we had to bring the cost down. So these are the things that we're looking at to make sure it's affordable, but I also want to make sure we have a nice facility. We don't want, just because we're bringing the cost down, I don't want the perception out that we're doing something cheap. We're doing things that are practical and trying to save money. So the inside of a custom fabric buildings that are existing looks like this. So you can kind of get an idea of what it would look like. They're framed up. They're not like your typical bubbles that you would see. They actually have a steel frame. They're fully insulated. On the utility side, they're actually much more efficient than brick and mortar, just because they can seal them better, and you can keep the heat out better, or also keep the cold out better during the seasons when they occur. And so they're more efficient. It also helps us overall cost and long-term probability for saving money and keeping our costs down with operations. Question 2, if question 1, question 2 can only pass if question 1 passes. Not to exceed $6 million for the betterment of the sites of the, but not limited to, in the middle school and the high school improvements of upgrades, basically for the systems, the heating, the cooling, and those systems that we have at the high school. And so the list that we have, when we put this together, these are the things that have to be taken care of in order for the high school to function at an efficient level and to be taken care of. And so we put this together knowing that the total amount was $8.2 million. We knew going into the question that we can only asked for $6 million, knowing that this exceeded that and that we were going to have to prioritize what we were going to do if this question passes with question 1. Again, behind the scenes, working on other things to bring the cost down. Since then, we've been able to do a performance agreement with Honeywell that can take these 4 items off the list. We don't need those on them anymore because we're doing a performance agreement with Honeywell to replace all of these things, which now leaves the list above these 4 to be taken care of. And if you do the math, these items up here don't equal $6 million. So again, trying to bring the cost down, only bonding up to what we need for that amount. Okay. The question as far as what these are your air exchange handlers on the high school, up on the roof, your HVAC systems and those types of things have to be updated as well as the controls that could control them and then utilize their usage. Okay. Questions on that? Correct. I was informed that these are the things that were part of the last bond back in 2005, but were taken off for fear that the bond wouldn't pass at that point. And so because of the wear and tear, we have to take care of that now. Okay. Another thing to talk about on this of why these things aren't taken, let me hold off on that. I'm going to touch base on that once we get to a map. I'm going to show you a map later on. But just so you know, as a school district, we have what they call LTFM dollars, long-term facility maintenance dollars. Those just started back in 2014. We were allocated about $350 per student for doing maintenance things and upkeep on the buildings to making sure that they're functioning at a high level for our students. But I'm going to revisit that in just a bit and talk about that and what it does. And then question 3. We're asking the bond up to $5.6 million to expand our career and tech area at the high school so we can have a separate auto shop area and then renovate the entire welding area and the woods area. We want to be able to make they used to have a big garage door there. We want to put the door back in so our woods area can now start going back to building homes or building larger projects so they can move them in and out throughout the season based on the weather and that kind of stuff. So then that way it just makes it more flexible. The other part of the question is to also add a 3rd cross court at the elementary building. Right now, with 2 cross courts, if question 1 were to pass and this doesn't pass, we would actually lose gym space for the students because of the space we currently have with Park and over at Hilltop in Henderson. The idea of the 3rd space is to give us what we currently have now during the academic day, but also have the space so when we bring the students over from Hilltop, we have enough space to do both recess and FIAD classes at the same time in the same building because we're going to have bad weather, we're going to have cold weather, hot weather, all that kind of stuff. And if we don't have all 3 tennis or all 3 basketball courts or cross courts, it's going to be tough to do that all in the same area at the same time. All right, and so this is kind of looking at what this question has. We want to add our expand our STEM programming. That's the science, technology, engineering, and math. Redo our welding area and basically become more of a 21st century, really high level programming of a school district and not have the limitations of the space that we currently have. All right, and so this is where the career tech area, we're looking at that expansion, renovating this whole area in here. The purpose of having it be more square than connected to the building over here is so it's wider so you can fit 2 cars next to each other versus having a long narrow space where you have 1 car in front of the other. And it just makes it hard to get them in and out of that space when you're doing work on them, depending on what's wrong with them and what you're trying to do with them. And so the idea is to have it designed to be more usable for what we're trying to accomplish with that space. This is one that was built in Minnetonka, and this is what we're trying to avoid is have one front and back of each other, because now you got to deal with trying to work the vehicles in and out, and if there's something down with them, you got to push them around, all that kind of stuff. We want to avoid that if we can. All right, so question and answers that we get throughout the course of the process of doing these public meetings. First question is why should we vote yes if you didn't take care of what you had before? So I briefly talked a little bit about the long-term facility maintenance plan. So that didn't start until 2014. prior to 2014, rural school districts outside of the metro county or metro area, the 7 counties that surround the metro area, did not have access to long-term facility maintenance. They had a different name for it. So if you were a school district in the metro area, you met a certain square footage requirement, you could get long-term facility maintenance dollars and or lease levy dollars without getting voter approval as much as you needed. There was no limit on it. So that was going on for about 35, 40 years. And so for whatever reason, the brainchild of our state and our legislatures allowed that to happen. And so rural America or rural Minnesota didn't have access for that. And so as a superintendent, I know full well that previous superintendents had to figure out how they're going to deal with building costs, maintenance costs when they didn't have that. And you have a general fund. And so the money has to come from somewhere and they have to make a decision. Do I take the money out of the classroom, put it into the building, or do I sacrifice the building and keep the money into the classroom? There's no question that was that's what they were having to grapple with over that time. And so with that, they've had to make decisions. So our building, are there things that weren't taken care of? Yeah, probably. There's no question about that. And even our high school, middle school were the things that even if the new building, things come up. Prior to 2014, we didn't have that. We've also had declining enrollment during that time. So your general fund, your revenue was also going down during that point in time. So then in 2014, the state approved opening up this fund that the metro schools are getting statewide. And so by doing that, that helps us obviously, but the problem is some things are in disarray or some things are bad enough shape that it's going to take a lot more than what we get in LTFM dollars to fix them and correct them. And that's where it's at. And so if you look at the whole process, you know, maintenance such as just taking care of our roof, there's limited dollars to take care of that. You know, and this money pot that the metro schools are getting, as long as they didn't build a new building, they had unlimited access to whatever they needed for renovation, fixing up, taking care of whatever, they could do that. So in this picture, it's kind of hard to read, but the legend up there as far as what the breakdown is the breakdown of costs of buildings as far as their years, how long they've been existing, okay? The very top ledger there is kind of white. That one is well below the median. The median average of a building that the state is looking at is 40 years, okay? That's the median average. So the second one down is kind of yellow. Any district that's coded yellow is slightly below the median average of 40-year-old buildings. If a district has an orange color, then they're slightly above that 40-year median. And if a district's red, then they're well above that median average of the age of the buildings. So I point this out because this came from, we belong to the Minnesota Rural Education Association. And if you look where all the red exists, it's primarily in outstate Minnesota. Now, if you want to know where we are, we're right here. And the only district that's had the same age average as we do is Cleveland to the south. The rest of them around us, their buildings are newer. And that's just what the data shows us of what we have. And so when we look at trying to market what we're doing, first of all, families are looking for nice buildings. There's no question about it. And I've talked to in the previous public meetings. I know when I came to visit, if the middle school, high school didn't look the way it was, I wasn't coming to Sueur. I was not going to have my kids be in a facility when they've been exposed to other facilities in their education that were of higher quality and were top-notch facilities. And whether we want to admit that or not, and I'm just speaking for myself, I know I wouldn't have done it. If my kids were going to go to Park, they weren't going to go to Sueur. That's just how it was, okay? And so we have to also look at the fact that we have to be able to showcase what we have for our facilities. People are looking, families are moving easily now. It's not that hard for families to pick up and move. And then because of our location on 169, a transient population or people that work in the cities or work down in Mankato, it's pretty easy to drive. But if they don't have something that they really like, they're not going to move here. And the location that my family picked was simply because of what was available at the time. They were happy with how the high school looked because all my children were going to be attending that building, and they were good with that, okay? And whether you like it or not, if the kids don't like walking in the building that's there, it's really impactful as a parent because I'm At that time, I moved a junior going to be in her senior year, wasn't too dang happy about having to move. And so as much as I say I'm the parent, I still have to acknowledge what my kids want to do too, and what they want to enjoy, okay? So when you see this, I look at this as a superintendent, and it's frustrating because outstate Minnesota always takes the brunt of the blow when it comes to the money that the state has, and it's frustrating, okay? The next question, if the referendum passes, the new school will fill up and become overcrowded. How do you assure that won't happen? This is the best possible problem I'm ever going to face as a superintendent. If it's full, the district is doing well financially, and both communities are doing well because more people are living here, more people are involved here. If we get to the point that we have to close enrollment, we close enrollment. Other districts have done it. If you're familiar with Sartell, Minnesota, Sartell has closed enrollment. They fill up. The only kids that can go to school there, new people move into the school district are the ones that move into this district. They don't allow open enrollment anymore. Right now, we are negative net loss on our open enrollment. We have more kids that leave our district versus kids that come into our district. I want to flip that to where we have more kids coming into our district and or people moving to our district versus people leaving our district. Okay, this is the best case scenario. I like this problem.
So does the city.
I bet, oh yeah, absolutely. With inflation, high taxes, that just went up more. My taxes will increase even more. So why should we vote yes now? And why does it cost so much? There's really not a great answer to that. Everything costs a lot. And I know that I got a couple graphs I'll show you of where construction costs have been and kind of their trend. You know, the thing is, if we get more people to move here, the overall tax burden does drop because you have more people paying property taxes and contributing to the overall good of both communities. You know, and that's the best answer I can give. If we have people leaving, it's going to be more of a tax burden for the individual family than it is if you have people moving in and contributing to that. And so the more that we can do for offering facilities and community events and things that people want to be part of and enjoy, it's going to just draw more people. And that's for both Henderson and Le Sueur. So here's a breakdown from back in, from 1990 to today. And it breaks down overall construction costs and how much they've gone up. If you look at the graph closely, there's very few spots that it ever goes down. The only one that was back here in 1995, it just slightly went down. But if you look at them, usually it plateaus, it doesn't go down. So I asked the question, or I posed the question. Looking at the past 30 years, can you tell me when would have been the best time to try to pass a building bond for a school? Because I've heard all the excuses. Taxes are high. The last bond we tried, well, you know, we were doing something in Henderson's going to raise our taxes. Yeah, I know, I get it. But I can't think of a time, looking at the previous 30 years here, when would have been the best time? And that's what we have to look at. And the trend, as you can see towards the end, really got pretty nasty here. I'm hoping it goes down. I'd like to think that because we hit the inflation thing so high right now, it'll settle down a little bit, but that's just me hoping. Here's another graph that kind of brings it in tighter from back in 2009 to today. Again, we have the national average, Minneapolis average, and we have to go with the Minneapolis average because that's, you know, that's kind of our local area of what we compete with and where we get our bids from. And you can again see how it's looking, even back from 2009. And think about the recession that was back in 2008 and 7. Costs never really went down. Back when they should have gone down, when you would have thought because of the recession and the supply and demand, all that kind of stuff, it would have gone down. Didn't do that. And then this breaks down specific things within structure or construction. You can see the lumber, copper, all that kind of stuff. Again, the trend from prior to COVID, right before COVID, Q1 2020 to where we're at now, Q1 2022. You can kind of see the trend. 0% was our starting point. You can kind of see where the percentages and how much they've gone up and where they've gone. All right, what will a new school do for our district and both communities? I kind of touched on that. You know, if you think about it, what if as a district more and more people leave and we no longer exist as a school district, what would that do to Sueur? What would that do to Henderson? And I don't say that to be threatening or doom and gloom, but you have to think about Henderson went through that back in 1990. You know, and so they had to determine what were they going to do. They had to join a school district or they weren't going to have a school there. So Sueur joined with Henderson. But the thing we have going on with us now is that we're not that far from any other school district. You have St. Peter to the south, you have TCU to the east, Belle Plaine, Sibley East. They're not that far to drive. And people are willing to drive that far. And I guarantee you other districts would be more than happy to send a bus up here to pick up our kids to go to school down there. I know that, I see it, I hear about it. And so we have to think about what is it going to do for a community if we have a new school, we have new programming, we're already starting new program. We've started a new FFA program, a new ag program, aviation, a CNA program starting this fall. What would it do if we can bring more people here because we can provide more in a smaller environment because we're a small town school district? General public wants to be here, not live in Mankato. They'd rather work in Mankato, but know that they're coming back to something that's calm. Same with people that commute up to the Twin Cities. They don't like that lifestyle for the kids to be in. They like this lifestyle, but they like to work up there, you know, for their job. And that's what we want to provide. If it's us being a bedroom community, so be it. We can deal with that because our kids want to be here because of the family environment and the atmosphere that we have here. Why not build a new elementary in Henderson so both towns have a school? Looking at the study that they did with the previous contractor, Henderson right now, with the way the soil is around Henderson or Hilltop, they put it in the right spot because if you expand that building anymore in any direction, there's an issue with the soil underneath with water, and there's a watershed and a wetland right behind to the south of it. And it would be more cost inhibitive to do that because of how much dirt work would have to be done to make that soil stable to expand that building to the size it would have to be in order to do that. So be basically taking 3/4 of park and trying to find a spot that would be secure or would be stable enough to put it on there. It's just not feasible with the groundwork that would have to be done. Transportation, by not transporting that number of students to Henderson, this district will save anywhere from $250,000 to $300,000 a year on transportation. And then having one location with high school staff, middle school staff, and elementary staff, I can now utilize staff in both buildings because of licensures of where people are at. So that way I don't have to have a separate teacher for a one subject area or a small area. I can now maximize them in both buildings, and it's easier obviously to walk between two buildings than it is to drive the distance between the locations. Can you vote for just one question? Yeah. Only thing is question 1 has to pass in order for question 2 to 3 to have any relevance. If 2 and 3 pass and question 1 doesn't pass, nothing goes. Okay. What happens to the softball fields and the tennis courts? If all 3 questions pass, the fields and the tennis courts will be moved to other district land that we have. If only question 1 passes, we'll have to tweak that service road on that location, and we'll have to continue using the current location for the tennis courts. And then the softball fields will have to be relocated based on the location, the land that we have at Park, but then also on the north side of the property that we have at the middle school, high school there. What happens to Hilltop? Well, the plan right now for Hilltop is we're in the process of opening up a new ALC. An ALC is an area learning center. It's designed for students who are in 9 through 12 who are struggling to fit in what we would deem or call the normal setting for an educational center. And there is a need in the area. St. Peter is the closest one that has an ALC, and they're at capacity. They're looking for buildings. They're looking for space to expand their programming because they don't have the space. Hilltop, fortunately, was designed without them even knowing it to be the perfect ALC setup with the open walls. That type of an atmosphere works well for students in an ALC. So Hilltop would transition over to that. If the referendum fails, Hilltop will only be open for this current upcoming school year. If the referendum passes, we'll wait to transition Hilltop over to the new building in 2 years when the new elementary building opens. So that way it's only one transition to a building versus 2 different transitions to a building. And then the ALC, Hilltop would be the ALC, and we have the potential based on the need in the area to pick up 30 to 50 new additional students in the school district. And so people ask, well, what difference would that make? Well, for us as a school district, that's a revenue generator from the state. You pick up 30 to 50 students, say you pick up 30, you multiply 30 times the $7,000 that the state generates or the state gives a school district for revenue. You do the math, that's the additional funds that would come into the school district. And Hilltop, for the most part, is a very efficient running building. It's not that expensive to have that building open because of its size. It's pretty small. For the most part, it's pretty efficient. What is an ALC? I talked about it just a little bit here about it. It gives students a different environment. It's more of an open atmosphere, open learning environment for students. It's not the brick walls or the kind of the setting that we would think of when we think of education for what we went through. It's more open. Kids come and go based on their needs. Hilltop would also be utilized as a for childcare for students who need childcare for their children if they've had children when they're still in school. And it just opens up a number of possibilities that we can offer that we currently don't, and pick up a number of students from a lot of other districts. What happens if the referendum doesn't pass? We'll then look at moving all the students to Park because we're trying to save the dollars. We have to say we're looking at between that $250,000 to $300,000 of savings of having all the students here. Hilltop will then transition over to the ALC. And then we would simply continue to use our long-term facility maintenance dollars to try to keep Park open. Park takes the bulk of our long-term facility maintenance dollars. That's part of the problem. So as a school district, we get approximately $330,000 to $350,000 a year for long-term facility maintenance. Park occupies the bulk of it because of all the upkeep we're trying to do to keep that building functioning at a high level for students and with the issues that it has. You know, the building, if you think about it, it's a 90-plus-year-old building. It's got clay walls. If you've ever worked on a clay-walled building, they just don't, when you tap into the walls, they just don't break up or they don't hold together like you would hope or need in order to do any renovation and those kind of things. So it's a tough building to renovate. If someone has deep enough pockets to renovate it, they could. And we looked at that. The problem is that to renovate that building is more expensive than it would be to build a new one. And that's where it's at, because it's that expensive and not knowing what you're going to get yourself into with other things that are in there between mold, asbestos, and everything else that we're trying to deal with and contain, so it doesn't become a health factor. If the referendum passes, what will the construction timeline be? The new building would be we expect to open the fall of 2024. Hilltop would remain a 4 through 5 building for the next 2 school years. Construction would begin as soon as March of this coming winter, so March of 2023. And then if it passes, subcommittees would be formed to look at the final design and making sure that it's unique for LeSueur Henderson. The outside structure might be similar to the one in Marshall, but the inside would be unique to what we want it to look like for our purposes. And then what happens to these programs? Adult basic education would be part of our ALC. As far as the location, it would be determined based on what the need is and what we have for space. We would find the space, make it happen, because we would be able to maintain the same amount of space if a new building passes as we currently have now. And then how is this proposal different than the one presented in November? The big thing is to reduce costs. We're looking at more efficiency with going with the stretched fabric buildings for the gymnasiums. It doesn't have the field house option that we had before. We had a big field house option as one of the questions from before. And then, like I said earlier, it factors in the feedback that we got from the previous bond, from the public meetings that we had, as well as how the vote went and what we need to do. What can you tell me about the voting? Like I mentioned earlier, voting starts June 24th, end of this week. You can vote by mail. You can receive your ballot. August 9th is actual in-person voting at your designated precinct. And then if you're not registered, you can register online. For the individual taxpayer on our website, we have under the bond tab, under the company Ellers, they're the financial company that we're working with. They have a listing there that if you, a calculator that you can factor in how exactly your property would be impacted by the bond if it passes. They have a generic one that they have, but if you give them your parcel number, they can give you specifically how it will impact you specifically with your values and where the county has it valued at. So then that way you know exactly the number rather than trying to guesstimate based on the generic one that they have. Okay. And then that is the last slide. Questions?
Can you go back to your slide where everything passes, that diagram that you had?
Yep. The picture?
Yeah.
Yep.
With the relocated softball fields and tennis courts.
Right. Just past it. Right there.
Do you think you're going to have enough practice facility in the fall?
Well, part of it too is we haven't utilized the rest of that up there. And so we'd have to figure out how to shape that land and get it so it fits for everything. Because basically the only space that we're going to lose, well, obviously there's 2 softball fields here, but then this practice area that we had here for the 7th and 8th football would have to be relocated up there or reconfigured somehow.
Where does the district office go?
In the elementary building.
On the new side?
On the new one right here.
Playground equipment from park, is that movable or?
Some of it is, some of it isn't. And again, all that depends on how it comes out of the ground, and a lot of it's put in the ground with cement. I don't call it casings or bottom, so that way it doesn't shift or move. But if we can move it and it's salvageable, we certainly will do that.
Any thought of putting the tennis courts there?
We've talked about it. The big thing that we're looking at is before we get too far ahead of ourselves is to see what happens with this, because we certainly have the space over there to do that. The big thing is what happens to the actual building and park. That's kind of the wild card, because I know I would assume from the city's perspective, an empty building can look over time start looking like an eyesore, and if we don't demolish it and do something with it. And so that's one of the things that we have to figure out, because if we put the tennis courts there, we could probably fit them in within that green space area there, but we still have to figure out what to do with park. And again, we have $500,000 coded to the demo. I'd rather not demo it and look for other options so we can save that money.
From a city's perspective, that would be a nice place to have tennis courts.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, no question about it. And it's a nice spot to kind of tie in with the community center already, because just the walking distance is realistic and not that out of the question.
Park is a valuable land, whether it be for the city to have green space, park, tennis courts, or even housing. I mean,
Just comes at a big price tag.
yes, it does. Yes, it
Yeah.
does. But it's a great location, right?
What are the different options you have for park right now? You said there were 3 options for.
So basically, so the option for park is if the bond passes, we've been contacted by Todd Verklin was contacted by a private company about possibly converting that into a elderly living space, apartments type thing. So an individual is going to come through and look at that building to see what the practicality of that is. We just had Honeywell come through, looking at the possibility if that doesn't pass, what kind of systems can we do to that building to get it more efficient. They don't want to touch the building, to be quite honest. They're hoping that this passes because there's a lot that they're fearful of when you start digging into the walls and moving stuff. And so the option would be to demo park, and or a third option then would be to look at if someone wants to come in and change it into apartments, if that's a possibility. I don't have the connections with developers and that kind of thing, and so it'd be a matter if someone wants to talk to us and look at that to see if it's practical or not.
When I'm thinking of development, if I think of that being a facility for elderly people, that's not going to help bring in younger families with kids. I definitely like the idea of a development that we can be bringing younger families,
Yep.
more students.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm open to any ideas.
What year was Park built?
1930 or 31.
It's almost 100 years old.
Yeah, it's 91 or 92 years old.
Probably one of the older buildings in town.
It is, and the unique thing with Park, and I've told the story to a few groups that, Park can be renovated. There's no question about it. It's just that how much you're willing to pay. And, and I got the idea when I was down in Winona. One of my children visited Winona State for college, and they had a building that was built back in 1909 down there, and it looks like it on the outside, but when you go into it, it's beautiful. They did amazing things with the inside of that building, and I had a chance to meet with the president and ask him, well, how do they get this done? And they had a huge donor that has some emotional connection to that building and donated, I thought he said anywhere from $30 to $40 million for that. Well, if we have a big donor, yeah, then it's a different conversation. But at this point, I don't have
a
that.
big alumni network. Our school district doesn't. So.
Right. Right. And so, I mean, if we have enough money, yeah, we could do some amazing things with Park, but we just don't. And trying to, again, do what's most fiscally responsible is what this proposal is trying to do and look at. And at the same time, have the best experience for our kids and families.
Jim, and I just wanted to add to that too. The Minnesota Department of Education does have something to say about this. And so if we do attempt to renovate Park, one thing that I don't think the general public understands is that we would have to bring the entire building up to modern code. And so there's like a 80-page document from the Minnesota Department of Ed of all the things we would have to do. And when you start looking at the indoor air quality standards and all that, we'd have to come up to modern code. And it just, the cost of trying to do that starts to add up more than just putting in a new building.
I think a lot of people think because we can renovate our homes that we can do the building when really we have all these rules because we're having kids in there and school
Right.
in there. All these regulations, red tape. Not like we can just renovate our home and do whatever we want. We have to follow all these rules.
Right.
It costs a lot of money.
Well, that's kind of the misperception out there that the renovation is not that expensive. Well, if you're doing your own, or if you have a contract that comes in and you're not necessarily having, inspectors coming through it, yeah, you could probably do some of those things. But in a government building that houses kids, houses public employees, we have to follow the regulations that are expected for a new building, and we can't cut any corners. And to bring Park up, I mean, a lot of buildings get grandfathered in throughout the state of Minnesota when they do certain things, but as soon as they start changing the inside of that for renovation, it's got to be brought up to code, and we can't escape that.
Thanks for the presentation. Best of luck, school board members. Appreciate all the work that you folks do as well. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I'd like to make one more comment too about, you said Cleveland was one of the oldest buildings in
Yep.
our area. For those of you who don't know that, Cleveland did just pass a huge bond referendum a couple of years ago, 60 million, I think, and they just got new gyms, completely renovated, new space onto the elementary. So we are really the only ones in that whole area that have not had any upgrades to our buildings. So, and if you look at the sheet Jim brought too, I hear a lot from a lot of people about how much better St. Peter is than our school district. And if you look at how much more money they are spending to educate their kids compared to the tax base that we're receiving, they should be. They're almost double of dollars that are invested to their kids. And if we had twice as much money, we would be doing the same programs, the same activities, same buildings, if we just had more money from our tax base. So I hear that a lot. And when you look at this, it really shows you what communities have invested into their kids, into their schools.
And I just want to reiterate, we're not going out for a bond to keep up with the Joneses by any means. We're not doing it because every school around us is new and has new facilities. We just really need to do it for the kids' sake. So.
And we have gone through this to make this the most cost effective for our taxpayers that we possibly can.
One thing you had mentioned earlier, you said we have a net loss in open enrollment right now. And
Yep.
a big part of that was because of the state of the facilities we have at Park.
Yep.
I do see some big negatives if we end up having this fail again. I see a downward spiral because we're going to continue to lose kids out of the community.
Well, historically, you have, I think it was either 8 or 10 years of decline in enrollment as a school district.
And people are concerned about our taxes now. They're concerned about it going up, but if we lose the people coming in, it's gonna make our tax base smaller, which is just gonna increase the cost for everybody else. So we gotta figure out a way we can get this across to the public that we need this.
Mhm.
I use my personal example a lot. So people, we're not from here. We don't have family here. We moved here because it was on Highway 169. And when we moved here, my husband worked in Minnetonka and I owned a business in Mankato. And it was the only thing that we could afford. And it was an easy access to both. But having no connections here, if this doesn't pass and things don't change and our community doesn't start investing into our kids, we've talked about moving. Our family is probably going to move. And so families like mine who don't have a tie to family, didn't grow up here, we're starting to look, or we're not going to look to come here. And that needs to be talked about. And families that have been coming back, like some of the people who left, like Mr. Roby, Mr. Hathaway, and came back, they have a connection for their family to be back here. But people like my family, we don't. And so if things don't change, people like our family are going to go, and we're going to go to a community that has invested into their community. They have nice schools, they have things, because we have the ability to just get up and leave, and we're not going to also get them moving in. So it's time. We have a lot, we could do a really great thing for our community, and we are in a perfect location for people to be the next stop. And people are wanting to leave the metro, and we are a great spot. We just need to be ready for them and have it ready for them.
And the trend is coming this way. If you look at the school districts and their growth across the metro, the trend is coming south. And so you look at, historically, you look at how fast Minnetonka grew, then Wayzata, then it moved to south to Eden Prairie. Then you're looking at the Egan area, Apple Valley, Burnsville, then Shakopee now, Lakeville is growing. So the trend is this way, but you have to have something to make sure you can bring them here. And that's really what you have to look at, and you have to be able to market it, and it's a team effort. It's really not just the school district, but it's the cities, the county, both cities, Henderson as well. I mean, we have to market it and show people that this is really the place to be. Small town America can't get any better. You have a movie being filmed again in Henderson and Jordan with some guy from Stranger Things or whatever it is. And, people like this, it's going to help, but we have to make it happen.
So I have to ask a couple questions. I agree with this whole plan. I think it is important to the overall community of the Sueur. You need to have a quality education available so that people will bring their families here.
Mm-hmm.
You also need housing, which is another challenge that is ongoing. But what are you going to do to market this beyond these public meetings, the few that you've had, and this opportunity? Are there some other efforts going out there in order to get the word out so people understand it? What can we do to help to market this? Otherwise, I think struggle.
Right. And we do have there is a YES committee together that has been doing phone banks, phone calls. I know on the district webpage, we also have a link or a separate tab that's just on bond issues and bond information. We've been sending things out on social media through Facebook, Instagram, and a number of different areas and trying to get that information out. We've had public meetings in each of the buildings as well. And so at this point, a lot of it's going to come down the word of mouth. And to your point, as far as we have to provide a quality education, half of this is on the school district. We have to make sure that our reputation as a school district is top-notch education, because the bottom line is we need to be able to provide an experience for our students. And word of mouth goes a long way with how people feel about the school district.
I don't know if you've looked in to see what is the type of age group of people that normally attend the primaries and, come out for voting. Because I almost would assume it'd be more the older individuals, and then a lot of older individuals are not on Facebook, or
Right.
not going to go onto the website. So how do you reach those people to help them understand, yes, it's going to hurt, but boy, it's really important for the overall community of LeSueur. Also a benefit to the safety and the security. We all know what happened down in Texas or whatever. And,
Right.
and this is going to ensure that security for our kids who are the most valuable part of the community. So, and I don't know if there is going to be any other access gains for, say, the elderly people to some of the facilities, say the football field or
Mhm.
softball fields, instead of sitting up on the high hilltop, they can
Sure.
come down because it's more level.
Right.
Or there's something that will allow them to, that kind of what's in it for them
Absolutely.
would be of some benefit.
Yep. I know as far as one thing I didn't mention too is we are sending mailers out. So then that way we know we hit every mailbox of any resident who resides in the school districts. I know we're hitting everybody from that aspect. And there's a number of things that we have to do with our marketing for senior citizens and getting them involved. Because I think that part of bringing that all together also ties in the fact is that just the community involvement. People want to have fun, be around each other and enjoy those connections and that type of thing. And as a school district, we have to find ways to make that happen and to make it more accessible for elderly that struggle with walking, that kind of stuff. I watched my dad walk and he wouldn't be able to walk to one of the games just because of his health. So I totally understand that what we need to do to make that happen.
Well, a lot of our facilities right now are not ADA compliant. And that's a
Right.
big thing that we need to work on. And safety security is a huge one. Yes. Yes, that was one of the.
With the improvements if they pass, that's part of if we can redo the football field, the track and all that kind of stuff, that whole area there would be redone. Yep. Right. We're also looking at opening up for activities of, I'm working with the new activities director to look at doing either free admission or open admission for senior citizens and those types of things. So then that way, again, to get more people there, be part of the community event.
Well, marketing is the hardest part because people only want to know what they want to know. And then I don't know why Facebook seems to be where they like to get all their information and most of it's inaccurate. That's why Mr. Wagner put those top questions. I mean, the LTFM is a big one. We hear that a lot. You don't take care of it now. Why will you later? People know that people knew that we can't. We tried.
I mean, do you go talk to Rotary? Do you talk to the Lions?
I haven't been to the Lions yet, but I'm actually a member of the Rotary. Okay. All right.
We could really use your support too and spreading the word to people because, I mean, you guys are trying to make the city better. We are too, and this will all
ties together. Yep.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't say something because my school board members would be disappointed in me if I didn't speak up and extend the meeting a little bit. Okay, settle in. But no, I think, everything that's been touched on is really valuable. And I think for what brings it home for me is, we spend a lot of time at the city level, at a staff level, and certainly council spends a fair amount of time on as well around the comprehensive plan. And whenever a decision is be considered, whether it's for parks or streets or infrastructure, the comp plan is referenced, and for good reason, right? It was an extensive amount of work looking at the next several decades of into our community's future. And partnerships with the schools and critical infrastructure, including the schools, are both referenced and are key elements in the comprehensive plan. So just throwing that out there, and I know, the conversation here is very positive. But, if we focus on nothing other than what does our comprehensive plan say from a city standpoint, we can tie a lot of this back to what benefits our community via the comprehensive plan. seeing schools as part of our critical infrastructure as just as much as roads are, that the community's done a lot in the last 3 years to improve our park system, which is being improved as we speak. Working on housing, which is, conversations that we're having right now, all of those things. Schools are a critical element of that. And one of the key anchors of our community. We haven't talked about them as an employer. I mean, the district employs a whole lot of people in this community, in particular in Henderson as well. An opportunity like this, just cements another economic anchor in our community that is really, really valuable and creates an additional draw, not only for new families or potential new families, young families, in the context of the housing that we're working on right now, of course, but also visitors to the community. I spent all of last weekend in Albert Lee. I will spend next, 3 out of the next 5 weeks in various other communities for, different events and things, and having a really strong presence from a school standpoint can do really, really neat things for a community from a visitor standpoint as well. And we absolutely are just on the precipice of the push from the Mankato metropolitan area, now metropolitan area, and the Twin Cities metropolitan area. And this gets us in the right direction. And again, I referenced in the comp plan what it speaks to around our city supporting schools as a key infrastructural element of our community. Yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Joe. We appreciate you giving us your insight with your experience with the school board, and of course also with the city. I just kind of want to close my comments with the importance of this project. I look at Henderson, and they've got a lot going for their community with their charm and their celebrations and their small businesses. Lesueur's got a lot going for them right now with the new downtown, new parks, new sidewalks, streets going in. This would add, like Joe said, it's a critical element for both communities. And to move forward, I think it's important that we capitalize on this opportunity, and we're only going to get it this one time. So with that said, I appreciate everybody coming tonight. And I'd like to close with, if anybody's got a last comment or question for Mr. Wagner, this is your opportunity.
I have lived through the clay building renovations and abatement of asbestos, and it is not pretty. And that building was probably 20 to 30 years old or younger, so to speak, younger than Park. So I can only imagine that it would be such a nightmare to renovate.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that because I've seen some of that stuff. It's unbelievable.
Anybody else? As my fellow council members know, I always like to close my meeting out with a motion to close. So any motions?
So moved.
Thank you. Council members Swanberg and Williams. All those in favor? Very good. Thank you everybody for your help tonight and your attendance. And Mr. Wagner, that was a wonderful presentation. We appreciate it.